Welcome back. In this video we are going to create this UI and we're going to set it up. So we're going to create the function which will set up the UI accordingly, because what we will need to look at is which values out of those that we get from our API response are the ones that we are going to require and display in our application. So first of all, let's build that UI, and then afterwards let's create the function which will take care of setting everything up. Coming back to our project, we of course need to import a lot of different drawables, so many different images, so to speak. So let's do that real quick, and you can download the whole project of course in the download the project assigned to this lecture. There you will find all of those drawables that we're going to use. So basically it's just a bunch of vectors here. For example, let's look at them. Let's look at the design. This is the close vector. Then we have the cloud vector, evening, and so forth. So a bunch of beautiful little icons that we will use for our application. And if you look at the code, you will see that there are a bunch of paths here with a bunch of path data that then basically creates such a beautiful icon. The next we will need is of course a bunch of colors, strings, and so forth. So let's just implement those as well. And I'm just going to add them in here. So the main screen content background color, which will be this whitish color, not fully white, but a little darker than white. Then we have this dark gray, light gray, and then this other rather white color. Okay. Then we will need a bunch of new dimensions, and these are of course some that you could define the way you want, but I just decided to use those values that you can see here. And as I said, it's really open to your designing skills to create a better design that I have created. So I'm not a designer, right? So this is something that I of course could become better at, but I think it's still a good start. And if you are not a great designer as I am, then maybe it makes sense for you to sometimes hire a designer who can at least give you some hints or give you some good advice on how to make a good design. So these are going to be the dimensions. You can of course also download the dimensions file from the project. So basically I could have said, okay, just download those files from the start, and then we're not going to take care of that. But I just wanted to emphasize on the fact that you will need to look into dimensions as well when developing an application. But we have seen that multiple times before, right? That it's really important to keep your project clean, and having a dimensions file where you have everything at one spot is definitely a good start for this. And then I will add 2 more strings, which I will require for my application. So let's go over to strings XML and add those here. All right, and now let's go to our layout where we bring everything together. So here, our activity main, and currently we only have this text view, which is just writing something or saying something like hello world. But of course, if we look at the design, we can see that we have a bunch of card views. So we have a card view here, then another one. So we have 4 card views here, which are rather small, and then a bigger card view, which is this one here. So we have basically a bunch of linear layouts, which put things next to each other and then on top of each other. All right, so I'm gonna go over it real quick, but I'm not gonna write everything manually. I think it doesn't really make sense for me to do that. All right, so let's look over it real quick, but as I said, I'm not going to go into details. So we have our linear layout at the very highest level. Then it's a vertical one, as you can see, so things are put on top of each other. Then we have a linear layout, which is horizontal, in which we have 2 card views. All right, so it's this card view here, which is pretty long, and then another card view. All right, so let's look at the card view first. And by the way, it's those 2 here. So those at the top here that are next to each other. So in the card view, we have a linear layout, which is horizontal. So we put stuff next to each other. Then we have an image view, and then another linear layout where things are put on top of each other because it's vertical. All right, so we have 2 text views in there. So it's just what you can see here. So we have this image, which is next to this other linear layout in which we have a text view on top of another text view. And that is the case for the other 3 cards here as well. So card views as well, they're pretty much all the same. As you can see, we're working with gravity here. So we are gravitating something towards the end, so the text views. And then the image view, we're just using the ones that we prepared. So from the drawable folder, for example, the snowflake and so forth. So you can find all of those here. For example, it's this snowflake here, which is this element. And then, as you can see, the gravity for the linear layout is center vertically. And that's this linear layout inside of the card view. So this is the linear layout at the top left and top right. So the top one. Then we have the second one, which is the second row here with the 2 card views. And then we have the final one, which is our bigger card view. Now let's look at that real quick. We can see that in this case, the width is going to be match parent, so we're going to take the whole width that is available. And then we have a linear layout within a linear layout here. So this one is going to be the one that puts elements on top of each other, so the vertical one. And then we have a linear layout which puts elements next to each other. So it's that we have this linear layout that we're currently looking at, which has another linear layout which contains the whole card view element. So what we do is we now have this bigger linear layout, then we have the next linear layout, which is containing this whole part here. And then we have this view, which just draws this line. And then we have another linear layout here, where we have 2 icons next to each other. So you can see it's again a linear layout. So this part here is also a linear layout because we have an icon with a text underneath it. All right. So if you want to know more about the specific code, check it out. I think at this point you should be quite familiar with creating UIs and understanding XML code. I mean, we have created so many different UIs already. And I really want to push forward new features that you learn new stuff and not just repeat all over and over again the things that you already know. All right, now we need to set up the UI. So we have everything set up in the activity main XML, but we need to give all of those variables that we have here, or those views, we want to give those some meaning. So assign values to them, not to the image view specifically, but to the text views, because they will need to know about the value that they should display, but even the image views sometimes. So in some cases, for example, if you want to display the weather and it's good weather, then we don't want to display a snowflake. So that's something that we would potentially have to change depending on the weather conditions. Okay, so let's look at that. Let's create a function at the very bottom here, which I'm going to call setup UI. So private fun setup UI, and it will need to have the weather list, which will be the weather response. So a weather response object here that we need to pass to setup UI. And weather response was, of course, our data class, which contains all of the different information. Why do we need that? Well, because we want to use those values that we get from this weather response object in order to then display the values accordingly, right? So, for example, we want to go through all weathers that we get. So for I in weather list dot weather dot indices, I want to set everything up. So what is this for loop? Why do we need a for loop? Well, let's look at weather in the weather response. We can see that we get a list here. So I want to have the weather. Why do I want to have the weather? Because here you can see we have a list which gives me information about the ID, the domain, which is clear, clear sky, and icon. Okay, so these are very important. So clear is going to say, okay, the weather is, for example, clear. But this icon here is going to take care of displaying the right icon here at the very top left corner. So we need to know what kind of icons there are. And therefore, you can just search for icon on this page and just let's see if we can find something. So weather icon ID, that's okay. List of weather condition codes. So this is what we need. List of weather condition codes. Let's open this up and you will find some examples here. Icon 10N, we before saw with 1N, but here you can use different icons depending on the code that you get. So here you can see there is this icon list. So for 1N, it's going to be this dark image. For 1 or 02, it's going to be cloudy. So basically this is the description that we get, and this is the name that we get. So the icon name. So we're not that much interested in the icon itself that they use because we use our own icons, but we use those codes that we get here in order to display the right value, so the right icon that we have. So here, few clouds, scattered clouds, broken clouds, shower clouds, and so forth. So these are some of the code names that we have here. And what we want to do is we want to use those and display those accordingly. Okay, and set the image that we have prepared accordingly. So you can either base it on the icon code, or you can base it on the ID. So if you want to be super precise and you have a ton of different icons that you would like to use, for example, to make specific information or give specific information about the type of thunderstorm, for example. So is it thunderstorm with light rain? Is it with rain? Is it with heavy rain? Is it a light thunderstorm? And so forth. So if you would have or like to have different types of icons for that, then you could use these IDs that you get here and use those. But I'm just going to use the icon code. Okay, so I'm just going to keep it simple because then we would have to have very many different situations to cover. But I think just using the icon IDs is going to make life a lot easier. Okay, so let's just use those. So let's go back to our main activity. And here, for every weather that we get, and we usually just get one, but for whatever reason, we could get multiple weathers. So they could give us potentially multiple weathers, all right? So what we're going to do here is, first of all, log the weather. So just to see if we get the right weather. So this will be weather name and then weather list dot weather to string. All right. So here we log the weather just to see if that gives us useful information. And now the question is, where would we set up our UI? So before we add any further code here, let's just figure out where that would be. And I think it makes sense to set up the UI as soon as we have a response code. So if the response code is success, then we should display our weather. Okay. So here I'm just gonna set up the UI as soon as we have the weather list, because we get that from this weather response. Okay, so let's pass that here. As you can see, setup UI now gets a weather list, which is of type weather response, which is exactly what we wanted to have here. Okay, so before we prepared that, and now we can use it to set up our UI. And first of all, I will just check the weather list and see if I get a log entry. So the weather is ID 800, main clear, description clear sky, icon is 01N. All right, so this is something that we can work with. So let's just do that. So let's start with our text view, main text, and set that to weather list at the position of the weather i.main. So what will that be? Well, if we look at our weather response here and we go to weather, we can see that we get the main, which is this string here. Okay, so we have just received this information. Now, of course, in order to use TV main, we need to import that. So it will set our TV main, which is this text view here. If we look at the design, which is this weather. So we want to know the weather, and it's going to set the weather here. All right. And then the next thing will be, for example, our main description. So we also get the description, right? So description text will be weather list dot weather at the position I dot description. So if we look at the logcat, we get the weather, which is main, for example, clear, and then we have description, which is clear sky. So it's just gonna set those two up here. So it's just gonna set in our main activity. Actually, it's gonna be easier this way. So here, this text view, TV main description, which is going to be this, which currently says condition, is going to be the description, which is clear sky. Then we can go ahead and set, for example, the TV temp text is equal to weather list dot main dot temp dot toString. So where do I get that information from? Well, if we look at our main, we can see that here we get the double temperature, and that is the temperature that I want to display here. So if we go back to our activity main, here degree, that's where I want to display the degrees. All right, so this is going to be this toString. And then what I would also like to add here is the unit of the user's locale. So application resources dot configuration dot toString. So what is this get unit? This is going to be a function which gives me back the unit of the user's location. So is it going to be Celsius? Is it going to be Fahrenheit? And so forth. So private fun get unit, where I pass in a value of type string, and then I return a string. And here the idea is that I set the variable value to, for example, degrees Celsius, and then if the value that is passed is, for example, US, or it is LR, or it is so here is going to be value, then I want to set value to Fahrenheit. And here an extra sign is missing, and then return value. So here we get a value passed which is of type string. Now let's look at our configuration, what that will be. So returns the current configuration that is in effect for this resource. Returned object should be treated as read-only. So basically this will return something that will be either US, LR, or something else. And if it's something else, then it should be Celsius that we want to display. And if it is one of those, then we want to use Fahrenheit for the user. And by the way, I forgot something here, which is the locales. So we want to have it specifically to the locales of the user. So where he is, so where he lives pretty much. Okay, and then this will give us the right value. And now just as a quick test, let's see if this even works, what we're doing there. So you see it loaded for a quick moment, and then it says clear sky, and the temperature is 6.8 degrees Celsius. All right, so now at this point you see how we can display data. We can display the information in our UI. In the next video, we're going to see how we can get, for example, the time. So displaying the sunset and sunrise. So those two times here that we want to display here at the bottom. And then I will give you a little challenge where you will need to assign the right values to those different text views so that they will display the right information. All right, so see you in the next one.